Hi everyone, welcome to today's service. Our subject is messages from God, and we're going to focus on the different ways that the divine connects with us and how the divine messages us in our lives. And we'll start with a song, and the song is In the Garden. Come to the garden, Lord, while the dew is still on the roses, and the voice I hear falling on my ear, the Son of God discloses, and He walks with me, and He talks with me, and He tells me I am His own, and the joy we share as we tarry there, none other has ever known. He speaks, and the sound of His voice, and so sweet the birds are singing, and the melody that He gave to me within my heart is written, and He walks with me, and He talks with me, and He tells me I am His own, and the joy we share as we tarry there, none other has ever joy we share as we tarry there, none other has ever known. And He walks with me, and He talks with me, and He tells me I am His own, and the joy we share as we tarry there, none other has ever known. How many times have you been in a garden and felt that joy? Being in nature, part of God's creation, is one of the ways we experience the divine in our lives. Now let's say together the Lord's Prayer, whatever version works for you. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory, forever. Amen. So, when we read the Bible, we often find the different ways that the divine connects with people. And I've picked a small selection of them. This is from Exodus 3. Now Moses was tending the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law, the priest of Midian. And he led the flock to the far side of the wilderness and came to Horeb, the mountain of God. There the angel of the Lord appeared to him in flames of fire from within a bush. Moses saw that though the bush was on fire, it didn't burn up. So Moses thought, I'll go over and see this strange sight, why the bush doesn't burn up. When God saw he had gone over to look, God called to him from within the bush, Moses, Moses. And Moses said, Here I am. Do not come any closer, God said. Take off your sandals, for the place where you are standing is holy ground. Now, almost certainly, Moses had never experienced God that way before. Then he said, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. At this, Moses hid his face, because he was afraid to look at God. God said, I have indeed seen the misery of my people in Egypt. I've heard them crying out because of their slave drivers, and I'm concerned about their suffering. So I've come down to rescue them from the hand of the Egyptians, and to bring them up out of that land into a good and spacious land, a land flowing with milk and honey, the home of the Canaanites, Hittites, Amorites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites. And now the cry of the Israelites has reached me, and I have seen the way the Egyptians are oppressing them. So now go, I am sending you to Pharaoh to bring my people, the Israelites, out of Egypt. What an interesting experience Moses must have found that. Note, the angel of the Lord initially appeared to him in a burning bush that didn't burn. But then, as Moses got closer, he was curious about it. It was God ready to help him. I mean, none of us would have seen a bush burning that didn't actually burn to the ground. And certainly, he must have been deeply inquiring about why this should be. And the children of Israel, of course, were slaves in Egypt, which is a terrible place to be in. Now we'll go on to 1 Samuel chapter 3. And this is where Samuel is called to be a minister to the divine, or at least a minister to people to bring them to divine. And this was a little bit different than Moses. Now remember, Moses had a long journey to finally get to the promised land, and they had lots of stops on the way and lots of things interfered with that journey. Now this is Samuel, and it's a little bit different. The lamp of God had not yet gone out, and Samuel was lying down in the house of the Lord, where the ark of God was. Eli was laying down also. Then God called Samuel. Samuel answered, Here I am. And he ran to Eli and said, Here I am. I heard you call me. But Eli said, I did not call. Go back and lie down. So he went and lay down. Then Samuel was called twice more by God before Eli realized what was happening. So Eli told Samuel, Go and lie down, and if he calls you, say, Speak, Lord, for your servant is listening. So Samuel went and lay down in his place. God came and stood there, calling as at the other times, Samuel, Samuel. Then Samuel said, Speak, for your servant is listening. And God said to Samuel, See, I am about to do something in Israel that will make the ears of everyone who hears about it tingle. Now that must be pretty amazing information or news. Then God told Samuel that Eli would be punished. So Samuel was afraid to tell Eli what God had said, but Eli accepted the result. He is the Lord. Let him do what is good in his eyes. God was with Samuel as he grew up, and he let none of Samuel's words fall to the ground. And all Israel, from Dan to Beersheba, recognized Samuel was attested as a prophet of the divine. God continued to appear at Shiloh, and there he revealed himself to Samuel through his word. So this was definitely different to Moses, wasn't it? Moses was required to go investigate what this bush was all about, but Samuel was called. And even though he didn't know who this call was from, and it took 3 times before Eli realized it, he was definitely called. And there are many of us in our lives that feel we've been called to different things in our lives. So Samuel continued to follow the Lord through his life. And he didn't run into the trap that Moses ran into. Moses and the people of the time never did go into the promised land, did they? They were disobedient and they didn't follow what God was telling them. But it was their children and Caleb and Joshua who did make it to the promised land. And this is from Dan. This is from Dan 3. Then the herald loudly proclaimed, "Nations and peoples of every language, this is what you are commanded to do. As soon as you hear the sound of the horn, flute, zither, lyre, harp, pipe, and all kinds of music, you must fall down and worship the image of gold that King Nebuchadnezzar has set up. Whoever does not fall down and worship will immediately be thrown into a blazing furnace." That was another one of these strange things. Daniel was a wonderful, wonderful prophet, but clearly he had enemies. So, and all the people obeyed except, and this is the satraps or governors who are speaking to the king. But there are some Jews whom you set over the affairs of the province of Babylon, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. So this isn't actually Daniel's tussle with the lion's den. This is the 3 men who are put into a fiery furnace. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who pay no attention to you, your majesty. They neither serve your gods nor worship the image of gold to you, your majesty. Sorry, let me rephrase that. They neither serve your gods nor worship the image of gold you have set up. Furious with rage, Nebuchadnezzar summoned Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. So these men were brought before the king, and Nebuchadnezzar said to them, "Is it true, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you do not serve my gods or worship the image of gold I've set up? Now, when you hear the sound of the horn, flute, zither, lyre, harp, pipe, and all kinds of music, if you are ready to fall down and worship the image I made, very good." So this was a little bit different to Darius, where it was worshipping Darius. This is an image of gold. "But if you do not worship it, you will be thrown immediately into a blazing furnace. Then what God will be able to rescue you from my hand?" Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego replied to him, "King Nebuchadnezzar, we do not need to defend ourselves before you in this matter. If we are thrown into the blazing furnace, the God we serve is able to deliver us from it, and he will deliver us from your majesty's hand. But even if he does not, we want you to know, your majesty, that we will not serve your gods or worship the image of gold you have set up." So they were pretty strong about that. They didn't know what was going to happen when they got thrown into the furnace, did they? Their faith must have been so strong. But they could have had a tinge of fear, couldn't they? What if they weren't rescued? So they were thrown into the fire. What happened next? Then King Nebuchadnezzar leaped to his feet in amazement and asked his advisors, "Weren't there 3 men that we tied up and threw into the fire?" They replied, "Certainly, Your Majesty." He said, "Look, I see 4 men walking around in the fire, unbound and unharmed, and the 4th looks like a son of the gods." Nebuchadnezzar then approached the opening of the blazing furnace and shouted, "Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, servants of the Most High God, come out, come here." So Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came out of the fire. So this story had a good ending, didn't it? The king now recognized the God of the Israelites and made the people worship him, which is very similar to what Darius did. In this story, the heroes hold on fast to their faith, despite the threat of being burned alive. I think they really knew God was with them. There are many stories, of course, of God's presence with the children of Israel, but I use these as illustrations of the many different ways God connects with us. The burning bush, where Moses had to walk towards the bush to hear God's voice. The call of Samuel, which took actually 4 attempts for Eli to explain to Samuel what was happening. And the attempted death by fire of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego by Nebuchadnezzar. Now, have you ever felt called like any of these characters? Moses needing to move in order to hear God's voice. Samuel who didn't know what God's voice sounded like. The fire that almost killed Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. How does the divine speak to us today? Do we know? It's one of those questions. I have experienced many people who do know when they feel called to the divine, by the divine. I remember when I used to work in a laboratory. It was just a little while after my husband had crossed over to the other side, and I knew I didn't want to carry on doing this. And it took, I would say, probably 3 different ways the divine kind of spoke to me to say, "No, you're not going to do this." And that was my journey to becoming a minister. So, how many of you recognized Jesus as divine in the New Testament? He was probably behaving like a prophet, but really more than a prophet, for about 3.5 years, from the time he was 30 till he was crucified. And even the disciples didn't really seem to get who he was, did they? They got into arguments about who was to be the greatest in heaven, or sending the children away. But many did get it. Remember the Samaritan woman, the centurion, the Samaritan woman whom Jesus told, "I am the Messiah," and the centurion who recognized that Jesus was clearly divine. Throughout Jesus' ministry, he told parables to teach people. He healed them on all levels of their lives, their spiritual life, their emotional life, their physical life. He usually told people not to tell anyone about the healing. And I think the reason for that was they came to him to really be healed naturally. They weren't interested in the spiritual part, perhaps. But if it was someone who really believed that Jesus was the Messiah, like the Samaritan woman, then that was the person he told, that he was the Messiah. So I'm leaving you with the thought of, how do you recognize the divine in your life? How do you feel it? It could be in reading the Bible. It could be in receiving comfort from others, from family, from friends. It could be the people who look after you. There are many different ways we see the divine. And our work is to remember that we can be agencies of the divine by helping others in their lives. So may God bless you all, keep you safe, comfort you when you're down, rejoice with you when you are happy and joyful, and always remember to ask for divine help when it's needed, because God is waiting to be asked. May God be with you all. Amen, and bless you.